All right, we're going to get started. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here, and welcome. I also just want to say thanks for those that are joining us online and in person. We have a really big mix today. We've got about 200 folks online. We got 100 seats in the room. And I also want to thank the Climate Center for Energy Policy for hosting us here today. And then there are also three groups that's helping making this opportunity today possible, and that's the Grantham Institute, Breakthrough Energy, and also Climate Works Foundation. So just wanted to give thanks for that. We have, again, a mix of academics with us, government, non-government organizations represented. I also know from looking at the registrations from Penn, we are representing 8 of Penn's 12 schools in terms of participating in this event. And so it gives you a sense of the portfolio of interests, but also the collective solutions that it's going to take for meeting our climate goals. It really includes all disciplines if we're to get it right. And by way of background, I know a lot of you from different walks of life. From my perspective, I just returned to Penn this summer after having spent 3.5 years at the Department of Energy. I had the opportunity to serve at a time where the most significant climate legislation in history has passed. The bipartisan infrastructure law to help build out first-of-a-kind clean energy technologies, combined with the Inflation Reduction Act with more economic incentives to help us build out the nth of a kind, and ultimately reach wide-scale deployment. And during my time at DOE, I had the opportunity alongside my colleagues in the Bioenergy Technology Office and also ARPA-E to be able to fund this effort that we're going to hear more about today, this in-depth report on roads to removal. And also at the heart of the effort, there's an understanding that every region has a unique set of solutions and that we're no longer in a position to choose only decarbonization. There are emissions that are truly hard to decarbonize. Either technology is still at the R&D phase, or there's residual emissions that are really difficult to tackle. Examples could include parts of the transportation sector, like long-haul trucking, aviation, and also thinking about the agricultural sector where we think about food supply chains. Today's symposium will focus primarily on approaches to carbon removal, but we're going to also be discussing carbon removal in a broader context, in a context where we know we have to first and foremost focus on decarbonization, but that as we scale both decarbonization and carbon removal up, we need to be very thoughtful and coordinated because each approach requires resources. It requires clean water, it requires land, they require low carbon energy resources, and we need to think about these limited resources in a regional way because every region has a unique solution. I want to go over a little bit about what to expect for today. I've actually put a lot of thought into organizing today's symposium. So there's a series of 6 panel discussions throughout the day that are meant to be interactive. Each panel actually has a mix of 5 thought leaders across each of a given area. There's going to be somebody from our Penn community on each panel. We have representation from the Weitzman School of Design. We also have representation from the School of Veterinary Medicine, which also includes agriculture, and then also the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. And we also have Penn Sustainability Director as part of our agenda too. And the panels also include leadership from companies who are leveraging the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act today. There's representation from a number of non-governmental organizations, including Great Plains Institute, the Rocky Mountain Institute, the Bipartisan Policy Center, World Resources Institute, Open Air Removals, and the National Wildlife Federation. Each panel also has somebody from government who can speak to the broader group about public funding opportunities in place today. And finally, of course, each of the panels has an author from the Roads to Removal report to essentially moderate each of these interactive discussions. I also want to mention to the students who are here that if you're curious about what you want to do in this space and how you want to have impact, there are a lot of folks that you can touch base with at breaks and lunch to be thinking about a career path, because it's not just, opportunities in industry or academia, but a lot of these think tanks, there's internships at national labs that can be exciting. If you're interested in R&D and technology developments, there's amazing internships at, of course, the government and all the various agencies. And so lots of opportunities that I'm hoping that students will get a chance to interact with folks in the room today. And when we think about the role of removals, I mentioned too, residual emissions. So residual emissions are truly hard emissions to decarbonize for various reasons. But the role of removals is really about counterbalancing hard to decarbonize emissions. But again, in thinking about today, I wanted to look at the interplay of mitigation and removals. And when we think about supply chains, like when you think about the voluntary market of carbon removal today, and you're going to hear more about that, corporations that have robust net zero goals and recognizing that they can't control scope 3 emissions, which are supply chains, mostly a lot of industrial supply chains like cement, concrete, steel for building data centers, for instance. Another one, of course, is aviation fuel, you know, for those of us that had to fly to get to this meeting today or drive an automobile to get here. And then there's also food. And so when you think about these first three panels, when we think about direct air capture, is there a way that we can incorporate it to the built environment? Is there a way that we can take CO2 out of the atmosphere and have that be a feedstock for making concrete, for instance, so that we're doing two things? We're creating a low carbon supply chain, but we're also doing removals. And when you look at the potential of impact in agriculture and low carbon food supply chains, rather than forcing somebody to have a certain diet, wouldn't it be nice if we can figure out the solutions upstream so that we can be flexible in terms of what we're going to be eating? And so looking at the agricultural sector, it'll be an interplay of methane mitigation coupled to removals, so that as we think about bringing these together, we can optimize in a way such that we can deliver low carbon supply chains. The last technical panel is on hydrogen. The state of Pennsylvania has a lot of biomass, a lot of forest land, a lot of agriculture, and there's an opportunity to think about sustainably sourced biomass coupled to hydrogen production. And in a way that the hydrogen then it could be used for the transportation sector, it could be used for industrial heating, lots of different applications. And after lunch, we have a first panel on measurement, monitoring, reporting, and verification, because the question at the end of the day is how can we account for all of this? How can we hold industries accountable? And so it's about thinking about the durable framework that's needed. And ultimately, that's how policies can be put in place, because we have an accounting system. We have economic incentives to make these projects economic at the end of the day. Societal considerations and impacts. As we're scaling up decarbonization, as we're scaling up removals to ultimately get to the order of gigatons, we need to be thinking about the fact that that wide-scale deployment means that there's technologies that intersect society significantly. These are going to be at fence lines. These are going to be in communities. How can we engage communities in a very thoughtful way, deliver benefits to communities that might result in reduced air pollution, cleaner water, lower cost energy? How can we also think about a way to actually economically include them in the equation? And then last, kind of wrapping up the conference in a way that we began, is bringing it back of asking the question, what is the role? What is the role of removals in achieving net zero? Whether it's a college campus, whether it's the city of Philadelphia, whether it's the state of Pennsylvania or the United States as a whole, we need every tool at this point. And that's going to be pretty interesting, but I also have a little bit of a surprise for the end of the day. We have a guest visitor from Governor Shapiro's office, Brian Regley, and he's going to speak to us. Actually, we're going to do a little bit of a dialogue at the end as part of the closing. So I wanted to just give an example, this conference in particular as an example. You were all asked to fill out a survey when you registered. How did you get here? And so when we look at the conference emissions, many came by plane. Well, Lawrence Livermore led this amazing effort, and so we had a bunch of folks coming out from California, Livermore, California, for the event, and which is awesome. And then we also had some folks. I came in by train this morning, and some folks are local and walked. We also look at the building usage, so we can have scope 3 emissions, and we can have scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. We're taking advantage of HVAC here and air conditioning. And so that's going to have a little bit of a sliver. And then our diet today and what we're eating. And so it gives you a little bit of a breakdown. This is the transportation. So this is where everybody's coming from. You can kind of identify where you are, on this map a little bit. So we can see Livermore off to the left there. And then a lot of East Coasters. You'll notice you've got some folks from Department of Energy and the government here, because this is my other family of the last 3.5 years. And then a breakdown of emissions and also sensitive variables. You might notice that the diet today, it's not vegetarian, it's not meat, it's vegan, okay? And so everything that, aside from the half and half, I think, in the coffee, everything is vegan. And so when you look at the sensitivity of the food and the catering, and you can see that going from vegan to non-restrictive is about a 40% jump in terms of emissions. And you look at also the sensitivity of train versus car, not so much. And then you see the significant emissions associated with the flights. So the flights and the food, these are scope 3 emissions. They're emissions that we can't control. And in fact, here today, scope 1 and scope 2, frankly, are difficult as well. And so the role of removals for us today is to counterbalance, if we can, if we could, these emissions. So how do we do that? That's the voluntary market. That's us right here and now, because we did it. We actually purchased removals to counterbalance today's emissions. And so 3 companies in particular, we were able to purchase from. Heirloom, which is near and dear to my heart. My student, Noah McQueen, co-founded Heirloom here in 2020 at Penn. And I think this initiative kind of pushed them to have a little bit of an online platform so that you can go to their website now and purchase removals. And so we got 5,000 tons purchased through Heirloom. We got 5,000 tons purchased through Graphite, and we have the Chief Technology Officer, Hannah, who's here today and will be on one of the panels. And also coupled to Graphite was a durable MRV product developed by Isometric. And so we've got Isometric folks here too. And then also finally Climeworks. Climeworks has been in the business since the beginning, founded in 2009. And when I had a conference about 5 years ago for the CDR primer, we purchased from them. They were about the same price. I won't talk too much about that. Okay, and so it's exciting that these removals are available, that we can actually go online and purchase them today. But this is what the voluntary market means. And it's this demand that's going to help to stimulate nth of a kind and wide-scale deployment.